All right, guys, here we are riding along in this Duramax converted Hummer. Love this one.
This is the first time.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. Me and our producer, Justin, who, if you're watching the videos, we took this truck out to go take pictures back in Marengo. Now we're at our new shop leaving in Woodstock here, and we're going to go take this thing out on some of the back roads. Chris, first thoughts here. We're just rolling up to 40 miles an hour. We're still in a residential place. What do you think about driving this monstrosity?
This thing's wide. This is a much more domesticated though.
Yeah.
So,
oh my God. There's an interior.
Yeah, compared to Blair's, but just initial driving. We'll get into more of that, but it drives nice.
Yeah.
Power.
Yeah. I mean, for something that, like, when you look at it from the outside, you just expect it to be a dog. And then you get in it and you start to roll on this throttle. And I know that was one of the things that grabbed me right away, was just how responsive it was just sitting there.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, I've had some seat time behind the turbocharger. That gear pack or gear ratio, it has different tire size, whatever.
Yeah.
It still has a turbocharger. It still comes to life at a certain RPM. And
the geared hubs. We hear a lot of guys talk about the geared hubs in the Humvee. The setup on this, the same. So it's really, it's something that's kind of surprising when you start to get up or off the line and up towards the top end of it. I think that's really when you notice the gearing change the most in this compared to everything else we drive.
Right.
But there is still, like you said, that turbocharger. You guys might be able to hear that just solid whistle out of it in the background here. Chris is going to roll on it. It comes to life so quick, and it's just constantly there. Now, this is the still 67 G2 in this truck. And then that's matched with a set of Exergy, what size injectors?
60 overs and a 10 mil CP3 pumpers.
Yeah. So keeps it a solid, I mean, on a normal truck, on a dyno.
Work with Exergy, do a trans, that we do at the shop. Just work with some of the vendors, WC Fab, and other companies, Pila Motorsports, for the conversion kit that we've done a lot of business with in the past.
And it is a wild conversion kit.
Yes, this is insane.
It's absolutely everything we needed to get the whole job done. So you have a Hummer, you have a Duramax engine with an Allison trans, and you buy one kit and you're ready to roll. And it's phenomenal parts. It was all put together just with the highest quality and caliber they possibly could.
I feel like we're chasing storms, like we're in like a movie or some sci-fi stuff. Man, this is crazy.
This is, I will say, from the passenger side, wildly uncomfortable. Super cool truck, love this rig, but riding around in the passenger seat, I'm not a super tall guy. I think pretty average. I'm 6 foot tall. One door handle cut off by this tiny hole they cut away from the doghouse.
Guys, basically, you guys all have buddies. You go on long road trips, and buddies talk shit to other buddies.
Yeah.
I could run my mouth to Paul right now. He can't do anything.
Right.
He can't reach me.
Oh!
He can't get out of his seat. So, Paul, F you.
Pretty similar situation. I think a little bit more room width-wise for actually sitting in the truck and riding in it for an extended period of time. But yeah, if you're not a small guy, this seat's, it's got a lot of leg room if I really stretch my feet out. But yeah, it's an awkward shape.
The one thing I want to point out is, the cockpit and the driver, everything is facing the driver, the radio, the air and controls and whatnot. The gauges are literally in your face. The steering wheel, surprisingly for a big vehicle, is extremely small.
Yeah.
And it's just right there. I'm 5'9" on a great day, 5'8" on a not so great day. And I fit in this thing perfectly.
Yeah, it's tight, man. I will say that. It is a tight fit. And the gauges, listen, we wanted to keep it original. Do you know what year this body was? It's the original 95, 96 gauges and dashboard, so it's all plastic. Oh, yeah. It looks very simple.
They don't make them like these anymore, boys.
It looks like it is 100% from that original era, which is kind of cool and nostalgic. Again, for a fun vehicle like a conversion, you're not building this thing to drive it every day, right? The purpose of this vehicle is to, take it out and have some fun with it, but kind of cruise it around on the weekends and skies, I guess.
The body roll on this? I would not take this any more than 55 around.
On the back road, generally, I think the speed limit's 50. Just about all. Man, Chris, it feels like this is your first time in a car over here.
Yeah, this is my first rodeo. I mean, I've taken cars down that turn at a decent. That felt more uncomfortable. But no, it's very maneuverable, if you will. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, the pillars, these front pillars, they do kill me on the blind spots. I will say that.
I would say they're like maybe for you looking out, but for
Yeah.
me, there's like this is one of the least blind spottable vehicle I've been in a while.
We're gonna let you go with that phrasing.
I mean, hey, you know what? I'm not perfect, but I'm just saying. This is
Nobody
a
was
unit.
confused about that. All
No,
right,
everyone understood.
but yeah, it does have pretty good visibility. You're sitting in a different position, I think, than what you usually are, right?
Yes.
So in your truck, you have this really short front end, rounded corners that come down. Your view of it, because your pillars are much larger there.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a different view and a different kind of perspective. But what we find here is that this is something. Yeah, it feels pretty wide open, even for it being the enclosed one. New manufacturers are really on when they're talking about developing new vehicles.
Okay.
I know that's something that we talked about with the guys from Ram, the guys from Duramax. Just everybody in the market is talking about noise, vibration, harshness. So let's run that one backwards. Harshness. So ride quality. Do you get actually really fucking smooth
I would say
compared
this
for
thing
what it
drives
is?
very plush. It's definitely an old like 80s Cadillac, 70s Cadillac.
Yeah.
It's a boat and it floats. It floats. I mean, this road that we're on right now, there's a lot of cracks and bumps in the road. It's not a new road by any means. It's just an old country back road essentially. And yeah, I mean, I've taken vehicles on this road where you feel all those bumps.
Yeah.
You don't feel that. I mean, even as the recording's going on, your voice, there's no like cracking or up and down movement of the voice.
Exactly.
So,
Which even when we were in the Apache on that spring-loaded seat, we were bouncing all over the
Yes.
place. I would say this is miles beyond that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
again, like we were saying, really not a lot of clatter and rattle in this build, and that's something that I do. That's clicking or
the thing that we need to
clattering.
keep in mind is this: we're gonna when we talk about clatter vibration, I think that comes from two parts.
Yeah.
Number one, yes, this is not on factory suspension anymore. It has a Fox shock setup on it, which makes the ride quality nice. But interior-wise, the interior, there's no creaking, rattling. Like
Right.
the craftsmanship in the vehicle inside itself. I mean, it's nice, especially for the year and what it is.
And how about, like, I noticed my hands on the wheel, it felt smooth. It didn't feel like there was a lot
No.
going on in the steering
There's
column.
nothing going on in the steering wheel,
Yeah.
the steering column at all. It's very tight.
Yeah. And then noise. So it is, I would say, louder than a truck and quieter than any other conversion that we've driven.
Well,
By far.
We hear a lot of road noise, and I think a lot of that has to do with the size tire and the tread of the tire.
Okay.
That's the Genie. I got the one. But no, it's right there, so it is very loud. And then you can also hear the transmission. You
Right.
can hear the transmission lines. So I mean, you can hear a lot of the drive line components doing what they're supposed to.
But with the carpeted roof, the actual plastic, leather, faux interior,
Yep.
the carpeting around, even with it being a wagon, we usually get a lot of echo in a vehicle like this.
Oh.
That eats up a lot of that noise.
Sound at definitely.
But I think probably the flooring, what's between us and the moving components, like you mentioned, the tire, the trans, these parts, that's a lot thinner than you. This is great compared to what else we've driven.
This is the quietest conversioned vehicle we have been in.
Yeah, I said that 2 minutes ago. I'm glad we agree.
I'm driving, so I'm not paying attention.
Yeah.
Do you remember that thing?
The Scottsdale was screaming. Similar to this, right now they don't have the AC hooked up. They were working on diagnosing the blower for that.
And I'm like,
Horrible. I guess is what I would say. Driving around, it's probably 90-something degrees out today. And we're about to go over some torn up pavement here, so we'll really push this vibration harshness to the test.
dude, I'm gonna
I'm gonna
hit the potholes.
Keep it on the road, but yeah.
100%.
We're ripping here. Chris has got a good speed going.
We're doing 60.
It's really not bad at all.
It's a nice suspension setup.
Kudos. I was just gonna say kudos to that suspension setup, which I believe was a part of that Pila conversion kit.
Yep. It's an upgrade.
And this on the pave spot there.
It didn't pop around. I mean, you heard the bump, but you didn't.
Yeah. You knew it was there, but it wasn't, dangerous. So no, I'm definitely impressed. I would say I'm pretty blown away on this suspension and tire setup and being in this thing, especially compared to the other Hummers we've driven.
Yeah. No, we've had the luxury.
You see in either one of them, would you go with a hard top or would you go with the rag top?
Hard top.
Hard top,
I like the way
really?
the hard tops look.
Okay.
I like the wagon. I like the hard top idea more than I like the rag top. the doors of the rag tops, you know, the flimsy doors,
Yeah.
if you will. I mean, the one that we drove that we did the feature on with Blair Outland, I mean, that was a
It's almost like, let's drive this thing to go off-roading.
Yes.
And this is like, but not
Oh,
a
yeah.
day like today where it's
Oh, yeah.
hot and muggy out.
Get some tunes blasted, you know, have a
Yeah.
little fun.
This does not have the super upgraded stereo to combat all of the road noise, which honestly, I know I'm getting old because I actually appreciate that I don't need the radio to be louder than the obsessively loud, like ridiculously loud vehicle I'm driving. As far as a luxury conversion Duramax powered vehicle goes, it wasn't outrageously expensive, you know, and it came back to life pretty well. So yeah, so I think what we're going to do is get a chance here to switch drivers.
Yeah, I've had some fun, you know, we'll kind of, this is a happy medium where we're at now, so we're going to swap drivers and let Paul kind of, you know, take control of the reins a little bit and have a little bit of fun.
I love it. We'll be right back. Stealth 6.
And it's right there in the middle, so we're doing 49 mile an hour right now.
That's pretty handy.
Yep.
No, we do, yeah. Okay, so we got some basic things up. Chris, when you set up a CTS monitor on a conversion, do you look at different parameters than normal?
No, I mean, depending on what the engine is, right, we'll take a Duramax into perspective.
Yeah.
I'm going to monitor roughly the same things regardless, whether it's conversion or not. So I always like to monitor rail pressure actual and rail pressure desired. Asking the engine to do. And then the actual, right? Did I say actual? Or
yeah, okay, so desired is
what the
program.
ECM is asking.
Right.
And then actual is what the truck's actually doing.
Right.
And you're able to compare those two numbers because that number is constantly changing by RPM and throttle boost pressure. I like to use the TCL, torque converter lockup. That PID allows you to see what gear the transmission's in and when the converter unlocks or locks.
Right.
So big thing, I'm a big fan of that. I like to do throttle percentage, believe it or not. For years, when I first started working over at Calibrated Power Duramax Tuner, and I would tune my own stuff, or Nick would help me with tuning, I would be like, yeah, you know, I'd get into the throttle, and this is what the truck was doing. He was like, well, what was your throttle percentage? I don't know, Nick, halfway. Well, do you know? He was reacting.
It's so funny you bring that up. So the first time I went out for a test drive on a new tuning plane, all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I'm really on this thing. He's like, yeah, most people have no idea what actual throttle percentage they're at. You feel like you're 50%. You might be the guy who's like me at 30%. You might know how hard you're working the truck.
No, absolutely. And then, you know, your boost pressure. I always like to monitor engine coolant temp. Guys, something that's very common on like your basic, you know, Duramax, Cummins. You monitor engine coolant temp based off of the gauge on the dash, not downplaying or shit talking the factory gauge, but I have seen these gauges become 20 degrees off one way or another. I'm not saying that it's every truck, but I like the Edge monitor because it's going to still monitor off of the factory sensor, but the reading is going to be a little more accurate. On my 07 Dodge, 20-degree difference.
Yeah. Well, you know, you're looking at a round dial with a pin through it as opposed to a digital readout of the screen. So it might be displaying correctly. It's just there's some scaling differences that come through when they move that.
And then I would say, like, you know, on like my Cummins, for example, with the MM3, I monitor line pressure in the trans, which is something that I like to watch. But for the Duramax stuff, you know, with the Edge monitor, those are generally the big ones that I monitor.
Gotcha. Yeah, I like that. I think that's a good one. Obviously, if you got a variable vane charger, I think vane position's a good idea to look at, you know, and some other basic things like that. And it is. It's the same thing on a regular truck as it is on a conversion. And whether that's you know, some sort of basic swap over in you know, an old C10, or if it's a big balls out, you know, Pila conversion, Hummer, you know.
Well, a couple things I've seen going to the shows over the years and seeing some of the really cool conversions across the country. Guys don't even really waste their time doing a big dash with new gauges. They mount the Edge monitor in the center of the dash, and that's what they use to monitor all their engine vitals.
Yeah, that's what Blair's was set up like. We've seen a few others,
so it's very
especially when we were at
information.
Yeah. No, it's a no-brainer.
I'm a big fan there. Now let's talk a little bit about drivability. So one of the things that I get about guys, and again, conversion, I get it, guys, but we're talking big injector, or my buddy told me not to buy a big set of injectors because of the drivability out of that injector. What do you feel like, as far as, you know, feeling of the injector pump setup?
This is one of my favorites. Okay, so drivability most often to me, or a lean to come to life. What's my acceleration rate? that has the most impact of drivability as far like suspension, tires, driveline, things of that nature. Braking, which is what I'm having to throw the hooks right now to get around someone on the side of the road here. You know, generally what we're talking about is we're talking about acceleration. It's so funny, I was just talking with Nick about this. So injector size, if we would have run 60% injectors or 100% injectors, the turbo would have spooled up the exact same. It would have had no impact over how quickly it spools up. That's going to have to do with it, so much more to do with it than the injector size.
Right.
Injector size and drivability is, in my opinion, going to be about heat control and smoke output, which are clearly tied together.
Okay.
Right? So if I got a whole bunch of smoke, I got a whole bunch of heat.
Yep.
So 60% injectors, we used to call that the edge of drivability. Because anything over that, 5 years ago, right? Anything over that would be super smoky. You'd build a bunch of heat. You'd melt shit down further. Now running up to 100% over on the streets, totally normal. Like not even easy. I was gonna say just normal. Yeah, and I know guys with 150s, maybe stretching it at 200s that are daily driver street trucks that aren't smoky. They're just not smoky.
And I think, you know, to kind of piggyback on what you said there, or to add to, if you will, ejection rattle, the power curve of how the truck comes into its power band, how rail pressure comes into play with atomization of the fuel that the injector is dispersing into that cylinder,
sure,
to really allow the engine to run in a smooth fashion, more so than you take a truck, a stock truck off the showroom floor, and you get into the power, where it might not have as much power as we want. There's no denial that the power isn't smooth. The delivery of that power band is smooth and consistent.
Yeah.
So when we talk about drivability as a company organization, or when we're setting up trucks, it's all those things that Paul said at the same rate of trying to retain that drivability, that smoothness.
That's right.
Allowing everything come together. And I think this truck, even though it is a conversion and it's big and bulky and it has a big single turbo and it has big injectors and a big pump and, you know, it has a built motor and a built trans, the drivability, even of a conversion as radical as this, comes together in a really, really solid way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we see that while we're out on the street. You know, I'm cruising along now. I'll slow down a little bit so we can kind of get on the throttle here. And here we go. As I come to life, Chris is watching the mirror on the exhaust side. No smoke. I'm not blacking out the guys behind me. I come right back up to speed quickly, so not even watching boost pressure or vane position, just watching what's my speed now, what's my speed after 3 seconds. Right. Truck comes right back to where I want it. I'm not falling on its face the second I'm off the throttle.
I think the big thing there, you know, let's dive into VVT turbos real quick.
Yeah.
You know, 5 years ago when we were talking about 700, 750 horse speed, we had to achieve that in a smokeless manner with compounds.
Yeah.
Stock over S400 frame style twin turbos, this type of fuel system. And even then, I mean, I wouldn't say there was any quirks, but that was the beginning cutting edge of, hey, this is what's possible.
Right.
Now we have a turbocharger. When we came out with like the Stealth 67, or when, you know, other various turbo manufacturers came out, back in the day, all that was available was like a drop-in 4094. Where the turbo was very delayed down low. It took a while for it to come to life, and when it came to life, it was like, hold the fuck on. Your operational window of where that engine's going to be able to make power be efficient.
Yeah. Now,
years later, we have a turbocharger that's come to life 1700 RPM. You don't even feel the transition. It's just smooth.
It's always making boost.
It's just
like, that's what I love about it.
It's crazy to see the technology advance, right? And all these technological advancements over the years, and parts from various vendors within the industry and the innovative.
Well, I think that's one of the things that was cool about this turbo is that when they put it together, they looked at the vane size and height and depth.
The unison ring for the travel.
The unison ring to get it, like to make it custom, and like to actually go into things like that. That's not things we did 5 years ago, and that's all we did back then. And now you get into, you know, balancing and testing and actually seeing what works and what makes
minor port work in the exhaust housing, you know, stuff like that. It's crazy.
Every little thing to see how it all adds up. And you throw it in a truck like this, that honestly, again, it's one of those cool swaps that like we would just give a pass to on coolness. Like I would sacrifice some drivability to have this thing every day. You know,
we're 1580 RPM and you were at 5 pounds of boost.
Yeah,
1580 RPM, 5 pounds.
Yep,
just
like
cruising.
It's nothing. Like it's nothing.
That's stock turbo. That's stock turbo RPM and boost.
Yeah,
that's just insane to me.
And it does it all the time. And that's, you know, listen, you don't build a vehicle like this to hide it in your garage.
No.
All right, guys. This truck has been an absolute blast to drive.
By far my favorite conversion to date.
Yeah, no question. No question. As far as what we've done on the podcast or what we've driven on tape, this is number one. I think the Duraburb's up next, which will put this to the challenge about the ultimate in drivability and comfort along with power and performance.
Oh, yeah.
But to date, right now, this is number one. This thing kicks ass. Thank you, Nick, for letting us drive it. Thank you, Adam Pila, for getting involved on the project. Exergy Performance, Jason Worley, WC Fab, and everybody else who makes this podcast possible. And of course, thank you to the listeners. For today, this has been Paul Wilson.
Chris Emke.
Thanks for listening or watching.